Hello and welcome back to Bad Comic Review. Today we're talking about Ectokid, issue 1. This is part of the Razorline series, characters created by Clive Barker, not written by Clive Barker, created by Clive Barker. And this is labeled as a tale of the Barkerverse. They don't call it that anymore, and I think they dropped that after a few issues. But this is actually written by James Robinson with pencils by Steve Scroce, inks by Bob Dovrak, sorry Bob, colors by John Caliz, letters by somebody whose name I can't read, might be Gregor, editor by Mark McLaren, consulting editor Malcolm Smith, editor-in-chief Carl Potts and Tom DeFalco. Alright, so we start out with a kid running and people chasing him. On the second page we get 2-page spread, pages 2 and 3, of those people turning into weird monsters. Now, the first page, I thought, well, this art looks kinda crappy. And then when you turn the page, everything's all distorted and weird and exaggerated. It kind of works for the book. Now, it's not my favorite art, and it's definitely not art I particularly care about. It's average, passable, but kind of mid-range to low range. And there's a reason for that. Now, this book came out during the height of the comics boom, and things were starting to decline right about this time. And this series actually became a victim of the comic boom and bust. You'll notice when you pick this one up that it has a foil embossed cover and a $250 cover price. $250 was ridiculously high for that time. In '93, that was exorbitant, but Marvel was not doing well financially, and they were pulling out all these gimmicks to try and get an extra buck. And it worked for a little while. Unfortunately for this book, by the time this came around, people were getting sick of paying 2, 3, 4 times the price for one book with a supposedly special cover, and it was a speculator market. The real collectors got sick of it because they saw it as a sign of garbage, and usually they were right. Usually they had second, third-rate writers and artists on the books. This one actually has James Robinson, so it's pretty impressive. It's a sign of the times. Now they have lenticular covers to try and entice people. Back then they did the foil embossing. Although these were not variants, these were the regular issues. So you didn't have the option. Anyway, we pick up with Dex Mungo. Yeah, his name's Mungo. Dex Mungo, who's a petty thief. He's robbing some hotels, stealing shoes and wallets when he meets 3 lovely ladies, and these women actually are very attractive in the book, who lure him into a room with temptations of the adult nature, and then he lays down as they're touching and kissing him, and he opens his eyes and sees these freakish distorted monsters. It's a full page thing. It's a really cool shot with these creepy looking people, and he of course freaks out and starts running away, and the girls chase him out of the room and order some men to follow him, and that's who's been chasing him. We get a really good chase scene where he's running around in this weird nightmare world, slides under a carriage, and he's trying to escape these freakish monsters, and he's saved by somebody with an exaggerated nose and a couple of swords, who of course is actually named Cyrano. So good job. Then we learn that there are 2 people, Ice and Tom Augustine. They're brothers, literally from other mothers, and they were both born a few seconds apart, and their mothers both died, and they had the same father. So they were raised by their father, who was apparently a violent sociopath, taught them to, and I'm quoting here, to settle arguments with a shotgun or claw hammer, how to gut a man for looking at them wrong, and how to make wonderful sherry sauce for chicken. But that's another story. End quote. And apparently the one is not very bright, Tom. He's apparently a big dummy dumb. So he's possessed by the spirit of a woman named Catherine Monvision, who was a witch and killer during Louis XIV's reign. And her spirit was trying to orchestrate the whole thing to capture Tom Mungo, because his mother is some sort of psychic who has access to what they're calling the Ectosphere, which is this freaky alternate world that he was in. The kid's terrified, so he's hiding out, and they're going to kill him. And that's the entire story for issue 1. It's very action-packed, very good pacing. There's a lot going on, and it doesn't screw around. It gets right to it, not a lot of time wasting. There's also a backup story called Have You Heard the One About Felon Bale? And that is a lead-in to Hokum and Hex issue 1, which we will look at in a different episode. And it's kind of a semi-pointless story where it's just kind of world building a little bit. I don't think you need to read that to understand what's going on in Hokum and Hex, but it's a nice addition. So it's a normal size comic. It wasn't worth the $2.50 of the time. Maybe 75 cents or $1, but I don't think that the foil embossed cover was actually a very good selling point. It looks pretty, don't get me wrong, but I can see why a lot of people didn't buy it. I had actually purchased this years and years ago when it first came out, and I may have read it once back then, but I don't remember ever reading it again. But it was a big deal because of the foil embossing, and it ended in issue 1, so the speculator market went nuts for it. Overall, it's in 50-cent and dollar bins all over the place nowadays. If you pay more than $2 for it, you're wasting your money. It's an okay issue. It's an interesting start to the series, and I'm intrigued to see where it goes, but overall, it's not James Robinson's best work, but it's far from the worst thing I've ever read, so it's pretty middle of the road. But that'll do it for this one. I do like the cover, especially because it is foil embossed. You get a little bit of weirdness around it, and the foil embossing does work for it, if you're paying $1 or so for it. If you're paying more than $2, don't bother. But that'll do it for this one. As always, thanks for listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode.